The sky over New York can look like a map when you are inside it. Stacked holding patterns and invisible highways, beacons blinking from towers and islands, voices counting down miles to a runway. On a winter morning in 1960, two airplanes crossed that hidden map at the wrong moment. One was a fast jet transport, new to the routes and as impatient as speed itself. The other, a seasoned propeller-driven airliner stepping down through weather with the calm of repetition. Snow hung across the city. Radios crackled with vectors and altitudes. The choreography was familiar, until it wasn't. Morning began with departures shouldering up through low gray and arrivals descending toward LaGuardia and Idlewild, the shoreline smudged away by falling snow. One crew watched needles, made turns by the book, and waited for approach to clear the stack. The other eased along an assigned track, ice lights blinking on the leading edges, wipers ticking against a windshield blurred by flakes. Far below, the harbor lay white and pewter. Far above, the sky was a room where numbers mattered more than views. Somewhere within that layered geometry, a beacon flickered. A wind shaved minutes from timing, and two paths that were never meant to meet began to pull toward one another. They did what pilots do: trusted instruments, headings, vertical speed, the clipped voices that say you are 3 miles from the fix, turn left heading, maintain 5,000. It is not drama to do this well. It is craft, built from thousands of uneventful flights. In two control rooms, controllers leaned over scopes that swept in slow circles, hands tightening as returns drifted closer. The radio carried a warning, traffic 12 o'clock, and then physics spoke louder than language. When metal finds metal at speed, it isn't a single sound. It is an ugly chord of air and aluminum and the sudden emptiness that follows. Above the harbor that morning, wings that had cut weather for hours were bitten through. One aircraft shed a section of fuselage and part of its wing. The other lost its tail and ailerons to an instant no pilot could outfly. Snow turned into confetti of paper and insulation. Panels and seats and quiet personal things fell through gray air that could not possibly hold them up. Two trails dropped from that point in the sky. To the south and west, a burning shape broke apart over open ground on Staten Island, a field that had looked like safety from the air. To the east and north, a wounded fuselage limped past water and piers and rooftops. People below looked up to a flash that did not belong to weather and heard a roar that did not belong to winter. The wounded airplane crossed a line of brownstones, a steeple, and a corner, where a barber shop and a bakery faced each other like old friends. A crew fought with what remained, engines unbalanced, controls stubborn, instruments bleeding their last. And then the city rose to meet them. A neighborhood heard first, then saw. A flash above the roofs, a bang like a bomb. Then the long animal sound of fire. A man sweeping his stoop paused to watch a snowfall of paper that seemed festive until a piece of it landed hot. A woman pointed at an engine where no engine should be, coughing flame between a tree and a stoop. Children ran because children run, and were pushed back by heat they did not understand. Sirens began to write their jagged line across the boroughs, here, 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 each one trying to outshout the others. On Staten Island, flames lay down over a field. In Brooklyn, fire stood up and walked down a street. Firefighters turned into a block they already knew by heart, and found it changed into a place without edges. Heat shoved them off porches. Live wires snapped like whips. Kerosene and winter wind made a smell that would live in coats for months. A wing lay folded beside a barber pole, paint scorched to ghost colors. Inside a doorway, a fireman saw a twitch in the ash, life insisting on itself. For a few hours, the city's grief focused on one child, pulled from the snow with burns and breath, carried on a stretcher past shattered glass and a church door torn open like a page. Hope, That most foolish and sacred habit, tried anyway. Blocks away, rescue crews stepped through a geometry of wreckage and ash. Around the impact point, windows were gone, curtains pinned flat by pressure, furniture shoved inches by a force no one could see. In the middle of it all stood familiar things that looked indecently intact. A porcelain sink, a coat still on its hook, a neat stack of hymnals powdered by snow and soot together. A church had been opened like a dollhouse, its pews visible from the street as if Sunday had been turned inside out. The city teaches by what it leaves standing. Behind the hoses and stretchers came the men whose work is to add numbers to sorrow. Investigators drew chalk lines, tagged instruments, photographed everything until their hands numbed. They gathered shards of altimeters and compass faces, traced paint transfers and scars in metal, measured angles and distances, and built the collision backward from where pieces lay. In a warm office stitched with maps, they pinned paper strips of radio calls to a board, laid weather over timing, calculated ground speeds against headwinds, and argued about procedures that had kept the system safe until a morning when they did not. Someone took off his glasses and pressed his knuckle to his eyebrow. Someone else replaced a pin in a diagram and stared at the result as if staring could change it. The truth that took shape had no single villain. It was a chain made of familiar links. Jets had outpaced rules written for slower skies. A holding pattern shaved a turn in turbulence. An instrument could be read correctly and still give a crew a picture a few seconds out of date. Controllers could speak a sentence that was technically perfect and still not be heard by pilots fighting an airplane with too much to say. The chain failed where it was weakest because every link was under strain. Aftermaths write themselves into manuals and metal. Approach procedures tightened. Minimum separations changed where jets and props shared the same air. Radar grew clearer, training thicker, phraseology more redundant on purpose. The corner that burned rose again in brick, then in glass and habit, but memory clung to the signs and the stories. A congregation without a church met in borrowed rooms. A barber swept a floor he had not seen under dust since his first year in business. In a kitchen, a woman replaced a cracked plate with a new one and kept the cracked one anyway. For the families, the world became a new kind of map. Some names were read from radios and never answered. Luggage unclaimed in a fluorescent hallway was inventoried, boxed and posted, or quietly destroyed. Airline offices hung black ribbon. Coffee went cold at dining tables while a list of flight numbers moved through the speaker like a grim litany. On Staten Island, people stood at the edge of a field and tried to make sense of a ruin shaped like nothing they had words for. In Brooklyn, flowers appeared on a storefront sill that no longer had glass, then candles, then photographs in cheap frames, the kind that will warp, but still do their duty. Months later, a final report drew a straight line and wrote it down. It could be filed, it could be cited, it could not contain the day. It could not hold the spray of paper over snow, the way heat made brick shift and panes slump, the way a siren's cry climbed the canyon of brownstone and seemed to look for a sky that would not answer. Reports are clean, memory is not. Pilots pointed to checklists, controllers to tapes, neighbors to a corner where scorch marks were slow to fade. And people told the story, because cities always do. Some said it was the day the modern sky learned humility. Others said there had never been such a thing as innocence, only luck, that finally ran out. The old kept dates, the young kept the simpler version. Two planes met where they were never meant to meet, and a neighborhood carried the weight of that meeting for a long time. The rule that endures is not new. Speed must be matched by margin, and margin must be honored even when the map is crowded and the schedule taps its foot. Stand at that corner in winter and listen. Buses exhale, a delivery truck grinds a gear, a child drags a sled over old concrete. The buildings are newly faced, yet built to the same scale. If you look up, you can almost see a line drawn through air, the path no one chose and everyone remembers. The city has not forgotten. It has simply learned how to carry the memory without flinching, to fold an old grief into ordinary days and keep moving. This is the entry the road wrote for the ruins that day. Two airplanes crossing a sky crowded with weather and intention, 1 minute too close, 1 mile too wrong, a collision invisible until it was all anyone could see. Fire where there should have been groceries, prayer where there should have been haircuts, a child's breath in snow, and an evening when the sirens finally tired and the flakes went on falling as if they had no idea what they were covering. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.